If there is one major takeaway to be had from reading this latest chapter of My Hero Academia, it is that Horikoshi is an absolute savage when he wants to be. The My Hero Academia manga is most definitely on an uptrend right now, and I am loving absolutely every moment of it. However, before we get into the chapter itself, we actually receive some pretty monumental imagery for the cover of the most recent issue of Jump. Here we see Deku sporting what is likely to be his very last costume of the series, officially colored in ways I am guessing very few imagined, versus the Demon Lord himself, all for one. Here his life-supporting mechanized mask has been broken away to reveal his newly rewound visage. And boy oh boy is it something. Granted, it is still partially obscured from view, undoubtedly for the sake of a more appropriate reveal within the story itself, but what we see here has already been enough to send the fandom into a frenzy, and that is mostly on account of his hair. The depiction of All For One here is not only his typical quirk mutation based white hair, but it is also two-toned, very much like our main character Deku, which, like freckles and unlike overactive tear ducts, he did not inherit from his mother. And this slight inclusion has been enough for many to conclude their suspicions true. That like elements of the Star Wars franchise, which Horikoshi so admires, our ebony masked main antagonist is in fact the father of our bright-eyed hope of the masses. Which, now that I think about it, I guess that makes Gran Torino Yoda. But before we go any further, this video is brought to you by Manscaped.com, the global brand for men's grooming and hygiene products. Plot Armor always has you covered, but Manscaped is here to help take control of your body hair. All of it. And very conveniently too, with the Performance Package 4.0 grooming kit, which they were kind enough to provide us with. First up, we've got the Lawnmower 4.0 body trimmer. This is Manscaped's 4th generation waterproof electric trimmer that can be used anywhere on the body. Then we have the Crop Preserver ball deodorant and the Crop Reviver ball toner. Two products you probably never knew you needed, but provide exactly the freshness you're aiming for. For head to toe coverage, they have the Weed Whacker nose and ear hair trimmer, a wireless nose trimmer with the same skin safe tech as the lawnmower. For a limited time, you get all this and 2 free gifts, the Shed Travel Bag and the Manscaped Anti-Chafing Boxer Briefs. Go to manscaped.com to get 20% off of all of this with free international shipping when you use the code PLOTARMOR at checkout. Manscaped, always use the right tools for the job. And now back to the video. But anyways, despite this cover not being complete and utter confirmation, it is hard to fault anyone that considers this to be a step in that direction, especially considering the dazzling track record of other widespread fan theories, such as Dabi being a Todoroki. But as if all that wasn't enough, Horikoshi decides to bless us with this incredibly involved full color spread. And suddenly, I know why My Hero Academia had to go on break, because goodness gracious, the sheer volume of characters encapsulated here, both prevalent and minor, is astounding. There is honestly so much nuance, charm, and personality packed into this illustration that it would take an entire video of its own to discuss it all. I encourage everyone to take a good look at it, and with all the hand-holding, I already know the shippers have done so extensively. Shout out to My Hero Academia's 8-year anniversary for sure. It is unbelievable that it's been 8 years already. But anyways, this chapter would begin with a video recording of the Flying Coffin's interior, wherein numerous technical difficulties were overwhelming the many staff members. As it turns out, Shigaraki's finger mount transformation had even more adverse effects than it appeared to on the surface, as the coffin was in the midst of losing altitude on account of the additional weight. It was certainly quite the task attempting to maintain order in such a disastrous situation. Yet in the very midst of this chaos, as previously stated, a recording was being conducted as someone with a smartphone in their hands will let it be known that the electromagnetic barrier that they owed Shigaraki's confinement to came at the expense of any and all communication with the outside. The mere notion of such behavior in the midst of the war for the world deeply unsettled one of the nearby girls. She would immediately begin to scold the collective, only to subsequently recognize them to be from the management corps, the likes of which have been given virtually no attention to the UA Sports Festival. Now this young girl will be ignored by these young cinematographers, who would instead continue to spout off that Mandalay's telepathic transmissions were their only way of keeping track of outside events, the occurrences on other battlefields, and the like, followed by perhaps a bit more of a poetic sequence of lines in regards to the accuracy of their location's name. This supposedly improper use of precious time was enough for the girl to shriek. However, the notion of this being an inopportune time for such things seemed to finally get a rise out of the management course student. From his perspective, there was no better time. According to him, every crucial battle up until this point had been extensively documented and filmed. Then questioning why she believed their predecessors passed such footage on to them. Then regaining his cool, the boy would say that the job of the management course was to produce heroes, that their work was of value because it lessens the divide between heroes and society, that this was the culmination of their studies for the past 3 years. And I find it interesting that Horikoshi even added this, providing convictions to just about every aspect of this conundrum. And as we would see Bakugo preparing his absolute greatest attack in the face of the dual-minded Shigaraki, the young man would consider this to eventually become the story of how they all won the fight before them. From which point, Bakugo would close the distance tremendously, sparking up as he grit his teeth, followed by one hell of a fallout that made it look like this coffin in the air was ready to be a coffin in space. Now, of course, his attack was incredibly powerful. However, on account of his damn near blinding light, it certainly proved to be difficult for Monoma to continue unabashedly staring at Shigaraki. But he did. The explosion would rattle many, while an exhausted and exasperated Momo would conclude that it must be Bakugo who was responsible. As she cranked out item after item, Power Loader Sensei would peer out from above, expressing his hope that they hadn't destroyed the power lines. Third-year student Yu left off balance in the wake of this blast would be left to wonder if Bakugo was aiming to blow the entire stage apart, then making a silly comment about the sanctity of Nejire's hair. According to him, despite what one might assume just by looking at the guy, Bakugo was actually quite meticulous and calculated in his especially methodical proceedings, the likes of which even extended to etiquette-based scoldings. A flare of personality which we'd actually received a glimpse of during his visit to the Todoroki household during his internship. From what Kaminari knew of his friend, Bakugo was not the sort of guy to disregard his surroundings in a fight. Now, remember that Horikoshi savagery I mentioned previously? Yeah, well, it all kicks off with this moment. As up close and personal, we see the right side of Bakugo's face be thoroughly ruined as his arm remained vulnerable before his adversary. Shigaraki, with the quirk-based analytical mind of the ingenious All for One, would deduce that Bakugo had made use of an especially condensed blast that made sure to prioritize both the achievement of maximum energy output and the avoidance of environmental damage. A commendable effort indeed, but one that demanded immediate retribution and dismissal by way of this truly superior power as he crushed the right arm of Bakugo irreparably, as if merely drained the fluid from a washcloth. This was most definitely a grisly scene. Meanwhile, all Bakugo had to show for his efforts were the additional facial imperfections now present on Shigaraki as the villain further reinforced his prior admittance that even now, he continues to have no interest in the boy. A very cold line that momentarily will prove to only increase in frigidity. Best Jeanist, Edshot, and Midako would do their best to come to the boy's aid, as at this rate, his life was to be forfeit in the hands of the villain. A pretty awesome display would soon unfold as Best Jeanist, lagging a bit behind, would continue to ride his threads like a surfboard. Midako would bunny hop from position to position, catapulting herself within striking range of the villain's finger-based mound, and Edshot slithering past all obstacles like a famished snake with its prey within sights. Yet unfortunately for them, Shigaraki wasn't nearly as impressed by the foolishness of the three who dared to trifle with him within close range, then demonstrating the fact that his power, even without a single active quirk, was comparable to the likes of All Might, swatting them all away with inhuman air pressure alone. Shigaraki is just that strong, a reality which now stared back at Bakugo like the shadow of death. He had given it his absolute best, yet even still the divide between himself and Shigaraki was far too vast. This was a power that could only be thwarted by the likes of Deku, and Bakugo is not him. And to add salt to the wound, Shigaraki would express to the kid that it wasn't his ideals or his dreams that interested him. And as he newly provided burns remained on his face, making him truly look like a combination of demonic student and master, Shigaraki would continue to say that the only thing about the kid that even remotely piqued his interest in him was the fact that he is Deku's best friend. Talk about foul. Thank goodness Bakugo has grown as a character, because had this been said in the past, it might as well have been fatal. And listen, any ill feelings I may have felt towards Bakugo since the beginning of the series have all dissolved now. He has been absolved. He has gone through the ringer emotionally, and he's gone through the ringer physically. As Shigaraki approached, Eraserhead would cry out to Mandalay in regards to Deku's current status. Yet alarmingly, she could not reach him despite having done so only just a moment ago. Apparently, the electromagnetic waves were messing with her transmissions, and so all she was getting was static at this point. And if you recall, Deku was on the verge of encountering someone the last time we saw him. This is likely to add an additional layer of mystery to this situation. And man, how cool would it be if a reformed gentle hero and La Brava were the ones being encountered? But optimism aside, Eraserhead was especially fearful for his young student. He called out to all the senior heroes on the battlefield, begging them to save Bakugo. After all, he still needed to graduate from UA. That way, he could aim to be the #1 hero. Eraserhead, of course, cherishing the dreams of his young students. Meanwhile, this raw shot of Shigaraki in front of a thoroughly destroyed UA would be seen. And this was along with the visuals of an entirely demolished Class 1A. If UA could be considered to be a character, Shigaraki has killed it. And forget Deku, any hope of Bakugo achieving that dream has pretty much been put to rest with the destruction of his arm, or at the very least severely hampered. But even still, our heroes were not done, as Sun Eater would rise to his feet. To Netere, who is also now back up, he'd express that he wanted to have a proper graduation ceremony. That once this was all over, they would have Principal Nezu throw them one, to which she would agree. With his eyes obscured, he'd question if they'd make it out of here alive. To answer this question will be the only man besides Deku that we've all been waiting for. Mirio was here and unsure, but knew that they would keep everyone safe until Deku was able to take over. UA's big three are finally reunited and ready to rumble. This is like seeing the legendary Sannin go into battle one last time together, side by side. I'ma definitely need an explanation as to where this man Lemillion has been, but boy are the death flags waving right now. My Hero Academia's endgame is no joke, and I hope you are all locked in as much as we are. As always, I'm Slice Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.